So we've had a big preview weekend with a lot of YouTubers and other people attending to play JWE3 in person, plus some Frontier streams, which we have covered here on the channel. I've gone through, watched some gameplay footage. I watched Frontier streams, of course, and combed through a bunch of Reddit threads and information from people. And we've assembled this presentation of kind of all the key points of things we've learned or found out just a little bit more detail about this weekend. I'm sure there's stuff I've missed in this. There's too much footage to comb through in a reasonable amount of time. So definitely chime in with in the comments if you have any other interesting little pieces of information. We also, at the end of this presentation, will talk about strong evidence for a new animal coming to the game. We don't know what the animal is. We just know that probably there's at least one more new species. I always thought this was a reasonable assumption. I didn't think it made any sense for everything to already be revealed. We were very clearly missing like a carnivore in the new species roster. The only one we have is Deluxe Edition. That doesn't make much sense. So none of this information I'll get to at the very end of this is surprising to me, but it is new information. It is actual evidence that another animal is on the way. So we'll talk about that afterwards. Not connected to the preview event. Incidental stuff that came to light in the last few days. So let's get started here. So of course we have the title screen that was shown this weekend here on the front first title slide. Just seemed like a good place to put it. Just kind of a nice thing to see. Not actually like informative, just kind of cool. So we're going to start talking about variants first. So probably the single biggest like reveal from this weekend that people are excited about is the confirmation that the Frontier variants are actually surviving. I was thoroughly convinced just based upon logical arguments that they were gone. A lot of other people felt the same, but no, they're in. It appears that they're all in. As far as I could tell, I couldn't find any visual evidence confirming the Iguanodon variant survived. There's no reason to think it would be cut if everything else survived. It seems pretty clear that there's no sexual dimorphism for the Frontier variants, though, so the males and females are identical. Unclear to me if there's any pattern difference in those, or if they're literally copy-pasted, which would not surprise me. Like, the fact that we're getting them at all is kind of crazy. It's also unknown if the juveniles for the Frontier variants are identical or not to the regular juveniles. As far as I could tell, combing through footage, nobody was able to assemble a pair of variant animals, breed them, and see what the juvenile looked like. At least in the time they had available. So that's very much up in the air. I would really like to know if anybody out there who attended the event was able to actually get a juvenile for a variant species and see if it has a separate model or not. We also got confirmation of the JP3 Pteranodon returning, labeled as the JWE Pteranodon, which is sure. And it's looking pretty strong. Like there's no new variants going to be included in JWE3. Nothing was seen this weekend that I could find. We got confirmation that the most likely new variants, which would be like the Dominion Parasaur or like the JP3 Triceratops, are not variants. They still just exist as solitary skins. So there's that. Some visual proof of these pieces of information. We had, I've tried to credit the Redditor or the YouTube channel that the screenshots or footage came from on the top bars here. So like this Allosaurus screenshot is coming from Ian Malcolm Jr. on Reddit. So just confirming, the Allosaurus JWE cosmetic set is the Frontier Allosaurus variant. The Battle of Big Rock one is the default now. This is the secondary one, but other than that, no real changes. Like it survives. This is my preferred Allo. I don't hate Battle of Big Rock Allo, but I really like this one, so that's great. Best in slot, visually confirmed the Dreadnoughtus returning. Nobody really likes this guy, but he's still in. We got the Giga surviving, coming from Ian Malcolm Jr., and a few other people have confirmed this. There's footage of this guy in action in game. He was released by, I believe the Jurassic Park podcast footage at least has him actually coming out of the hatchery. So good to confirm that. And then, yeah, the JP3 Pteranodon is an interesting case. So, a few things here. There is no dimorphism in this animal. The reason this is interesting is this is a film variant, not a frontier variant. However, there probably shouldn't be any substantial dimorphism because the male was designed for this pteranodon. It's not present in the film, only the female shows up. But there was a fully realized JP3 pteranodon male. It was this like black skin with like yellow striping on the crest. Now, in JWE3, we do not have seemingly any new film skins, and that includes any new male skin for the JP3 Pteranodon. We have the female skin, which I heard somewhere is also able to be applied to the male, which seems really weird and runs counter to a lot of the upcoming stuff we're going to talk about with skins. But that claim is out there. But yeah, no explicitly film male skin. However, this pattern for the male here is able to pretty closely capture the male from the film. I think this might have been kind of how it was in 2. Been a little while since I've looked at the JP3 Pteranodon. I have a tendency to use the modded Lost World Pteranodon as my preferred one, so despite the fact that there's no male, it seems like we can probably just recreate that in game pretty well anyway, so it's probably fine. I personally, I would prefer if the base patterns for dinosaurs just included the film version, and then you essentially were recoloring the patterning from the film animal. But they moved away from that pretty heavily with like the Dominion DLC. Like we got, the film Iguanodon variant, but then the patterning was entirely different once you moved away from the particular film skin. Also entirely inferior. I'm not a big fan of the Dominion Iguanodon to begin with, but the frontier patterning for it is atrocious. And so it makes the film skin kind of the go-to and the only one worth using. Very weird that they didn't use that as the basis for the pattern for the full variant. So yeah, I think that's all we have to say there. Let's talk about the extra skins. That ties into what we were just talking about. So essentially every film/show skin or extra special skin is in the game. That was in 2. They've all made it into 3. This includes most of the Camp Cretaceous skins. Notable absence is Bumpy. As far as I've been able to tell, Bumpy is the only skin that is fully missing from JWE3, at least in this dev build, this show build. Now, this could just be an oversight. This could be a particular choice made for that build to remove Bumpy. Or this could be a sign of some degree of reworking for this skin. So the thought that occurs to me is one of the notable things about Bumpy is it's like essentially the only animal in the entire franchise that we see grow from a hatchling to an adult. And so that always made it weird to have just adult Bumpy skin. It made sense it was only the adult Bumpy because we didn't have juveniles previously, right? But now we do have juveniles. So one would logically think, hey, this is a huge opportunity for them to do a juvenile Bumpy skin. Now, I could see this getting weird, right? If they do a Bumpy skin for the juvenile, they don't put it in release and they try to sell it in DLC, how does that interact with the adult skin if that's just in at release? So my thought process is we don't actually know how these film skins work with the babies. The babies have different patterns, but they still follow the same, base color plus pattern scheme, right? So even though the pattern on the baby changes when it becomes an adult, you can one-to-one transfer the colors, right? But that isn't true necessarily if you're going to have a like a tiger stripe raptor baby, right? And we don't really know how that works. Like, we don't know if there's a juvenile tiger stripe raptor skin that then grows up into an adult tiger stripe raptor, or if you just can't breed juvenile tiger stripe raptors, or if they will appear one way and then kind of grow into an adult and suddenly be the tiger stripe one. So my thought process is, what if in DLC they're intending to add a bumpy skin that actually has a juvenile animal color that propagates to the adult, right? So it has an adult skin form and a juvenile form, and that maintains continuity, right? You don't have anything else going on there. Now, this would potentially be like the first juvenile film skin they add to the game. This is the kind of thing they could monetize. So this might explain why Bumpy is missing. Bumpy perhaps has been cut to be resold as a skin with kind of a special mechanic, maybe. This is completely speculation, except for the fact that Bumpy is missing. But that's my hunch. That's my hunch as to what is going on here. The other big change with the film skins is all the skins in the game are gendered now for the film skins. So for the Raptors and the Rexes, these are broken up in the way you'd expect, where the ones that are canonically female are only available to females, and the ones that are canonically male, only available to males. This also follows with the Camp Cretaceous skins. Grim and Chaos are female, Limbo is male. Apparently this is true, and that's the way it is in the game. And then for the Carnotaurs, the Toro is listed as a male in-game, so you can't do a female Toro. And the Demon Carnotaurus from Dominion is listed as female. I always personally felt like the Demon Carno felt male to me. The black skin feels more showy than the more muted red skin from like Fallen Kingdom and Toro, but if Toro is canonically male, then that kind of flips that anyway. So yeah, you can't make a male Demon Carno, you can't make a female Toro. Interestingly enough, the 2022 Biosyn Dilophosaurus is only female. Sure, I don't know if there's much support for that, but the choice has been made. We can confirm the JP3 Anki is back, specifically as a female. I don't know if it's only a female. I will say the JP3 Anki to me always felt very male with that red face that feels like a marking that signifies a male, like a display feature. And I always kind of just assumed we just didn't see the females because the Anki screen time was very limited in JP3 and was even cut down from what was originally planned. You could find unfinished Anki scenes out there for JP3. So it just feels to me like they just made, a male model for the Anki and just used that for everything. But it appears Frontier has made the choice that, most of the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park and World are female. So they've put them as female. But that's not necessarily true of the Sorna animals, and they've still made that call. This propagates to the Dominion, to the Parasaurs too. We have a shot here of the Dominion Parasaur confirming that is included. But specifically, we can look at the Parasaur skins and see that the 3 Dominion ones, the 2 Lux skins and the 97 and 2001 skins are all preserved here, and they're all female skins. Now, I wasn't able to find out if there are any film skins for the male. I did find a comment that specifically said the Dominion skins are only available to female Parasaurs. So my guess is, based on this information, based on what we've seen from the Dilophosaurus, which is 100% confirmed to only have a female skin and no male film skins, I think the default choice for Frontier was to make every film skin female only, unless there was a reason specifically for it to be male, because it has been identified specifically as a male in the franchise. I don't necessarily agree with this, but I understand it. This gets weird in a few other ways. The feathered T-Rex is confirmed back, right? This has been seen in game. But if we look at the distribution of the Rex skins here with these screenshots from the Jurassic Park podcast, we can see that the feathered T-Rex is actually only available to a female T-Rex. Another choice that feels very weird to me. I think the Dominion Para should be available to males. I think the feathered T-Rex should be available to males. I think the Dilo should not be gendered. So yeah, the only male skins we get for the Rex are, the canonical buck and bull T-Rexes from JP Lost World, from Lost World and JP3. For the Velociraptors, it's the same deal. We have the Raptor squad, we have the 93 Raptor, the 97 female, and the 2001 female, and then the male Tiger Striped and the male JP3 Raptor are the only male skins. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at on the variants and the skins. We can also discuss any updates to species. I would say that mostly this is a lack of updates to species. First, a small detail. In JWE2, with the way the feather rendering worked and the lighting engine worked, the feathered animals did not have shadows from the feathers. So if you had a shadow from a Pyroraptor, it looked like it was naked. You didn't see the tail fan on the tail, the feather fan on the tail. You didn't see the wings. None of that showed up. That's been fixed for 3, so the shadows actually do accurately represent the anatomy of the animal. Another interesting change / fix for 3 that people have been asking about for all of eternity, the Dilophosaurus is actually poisonous now, which is a great change. Should have been poisonous in the first game, honestly, when Troodon was added, but it's just never been updated to be poisonous until this time. Another thing people have been discussing that I was curious about is so in JWE2, when we got the variants for the Giga, the very distinctive scarring of the Giga propagated to the variant. In particular, this big chunk of missing scales on the tail here. That scar showed up on every single Dominion Giga you ever cloned. It has not been fixed for 3. The JWE3 Giga keeps the same scarring present in the movie version for every one you release. I saw a comment on Reddit that this is a universal thing from somebody who worked for Frontier in the past. So, okay, maybe. It seems like a really weird thing for Universal to put a foot down on. The thing there is that the film animals, at least from the World Trilogy, are based on the actual CG renders. So maybe there is some sort of stipulation from Universal that for the animals that have an official model, Frontier isn't allowed to make model edits to those, only recolor them. But like, it was kind of weird. But that seems to be the case because the scarring is back and just fixed. A big thing I was disappointed with is the pterosaur diets do seem to be unchanged. This is a screenshot of the aviary roster from the demo version. And there is no herbivorous Tapejara, or at least they haven't changed the icon. Very disappointing. I would like to see some reworks to the aviary diets especially, and some diversification added in there. I think the Asdarchids, Quetzalcoatlus, and Thanatos Dracon should be specifically carnivorous, not piscivorous. Tapejara should be an herbivore, and I think Dimorphodon should probably be an insect eater, but insectivory seems to have been dropped as a mechanic from JWE3 as what, in addition to, none of this being reworked. So this seems pretty disappointing. Could still change. But given that, we haven't seen any evidence of that yet, probably isn't. I'm going to say including Tapejara in the roster for JWE3 and not making it herbivorous is just a mistake. If you're already cutting animals, cut the animals that have limitations on them that don't make sense, like Tapajara's diet. Like, what is the point of adding this animal to the game again and not giving it the distinctive diet? Another pretty substantial reveal from this weekend is that we have been able to confirm the full semi-aquatic roster. The final missing animal was Spinoraptor, which was reported by a few different people and confirmed in Swerve's gameplay. So we know we already knew there was no new animals that were semi-aquatics. The big debate was if the fifth animal represented maybe an interesting herbivorous inclusion, or if it was hinting towards Suchomimus making the cut, or if it was like Spinoraptor. I was firmly in camp Spinoraptor because we already knew it was in the game. I felt that it was very clearly going to be an animal that could swim, using some of the Pyroraptor animations, and it's been confirmed that it's in. So Suchomimus 100% cut at this point. It's not in the game. And Suchomimus not being in the game, essentially, in my mind, also fully confirms that Pachyrhinosaurus and Majungasaurus are also cut for a Chaos Theory reintroduction. So, next category, mechanic changes. One small balance change I noticed was the species research is now primarily centered on the logistics skill instead of the genetics skill. So your expedition team with their high logistics value also has to do the research to unlock the new species in the dig sites. So that is definitely a rebalancing factor. We, of course, know there's some changes to the path mechanics. We have some examples of that in the upcoming slides here. There are some interesting changes to how appeal functions in the game. We now get a set of different bonuses to appeal. Instead of it being the JWE2 system of essentially, this is the animal's base appeal, here it is. We get the base appeal, but then we get a bunch of different modifiers coming from the animal genetics. We get a modifier coming from if the animal was grown from a juvenile, a naturally born juvenile. And we get additional stacking bonuses for every subsequent generation of naturally bred dinosaurs. So if you start with a T-Rex and then you breed a new T-Rex, that new T-Rex will have a higher appeal score. And if that T-Rex grows to an adult, and breeds a third generation, that generation will have an even higher appeal score. This might lend itself to some interesting park builds. I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can do in terms of park theming with the animal breeding. Very disappointing thing from this weekend to a lot of people was that the combat mechanics seem to be unchanged. Dinosaurs fight the same way they did. Sauropods don't defend themselves. There's no real evidence of animals defending their babies from predators. In fact, it seems that when the predators make contact with a baby, it essentially just ragdolls on contact and just kind of dies. There is, I think it was Evo Square who had a Diplodocus baby survive contact with the enemy. It just kind of got knocked over, bloodied up, and then it just stood up and ran away. But there doesn't seem to be actually, at least in this dev build, any like animations that really happen between the babies and the adults, the adult predators. They just kind of knock them over, which is a little whatever. One kind of interesting thing in terms of environmental immersion is the addition of trackways. I found this in Best in Slots video. He covers this kind of nice muddy ground texture you can do, which I thought was really cool. And I especially like seeing these hadrosaurs walk through this mud and leave these footprints behind them. These trackways show up multiple times in the gameplay footage. They happen on sand, they happen on dirt, maybe they happen everywhere in general. But I think they looked, the best and the most immersive here in the mud. I did notice some pretty obvious pop-in with the trackways. Specifically, you could see the exact moment the tracks popped in underneath the dinosaur's foot when it was on the ground in a few different places. So I think there needs to be a little bit of tweaking here. It's like the footprint is just slightly I mean, the footprint should be bigger than the foot, right? Because the foot goes inside the footprint. Problem is, in game, you see specifically the instance the footprint pops up around the foot. Like it doesn't actually have three-dimensional structure to it because it's just like a decal, but you can still see the exact moment the trackway emerges from the foot, which is pretty jarring looking. Um, I'm not sure if there's a good solution to that. Maybe just the timing of when it appears, like timing it for exactly when the foot leaves the ground or something, maybe is better than it appearing like under the foot. I don't know. Just something I noticed. Figured I'd comment on it. If it doesn't get fixed, it's like really not a concern. Um, Other mechanical changes, we have some adjustments to the tranquilizer mechanics. In Evo Square's gameplay footage, you can see. I don't know if this is a specific mode she activated. I wasn't clear on this, or if this is how all sedation works. I kind of only watched her campaign footage, skimmed through that, and I didn't really bother rewatching most other people's campaign footage. I mostly skimmed through sandbox footage to see what they were doing. But this system seemed interesting because it would pop up this like UI, which would tell you if you have a clear shot at the animal, then there would be this, when the shot is clear, there would be this progress bar that fills up to sedate the animal when it gets to 100%. So instead of sitting there trying to, shoot a compy for like 20 minutes straight, theoretically, this system would allow you to just hover over the compy and just get it done quickly. So this seems pretty nice mechanically as a change. So glad to see that. I don't know if this is standard or not, but I think it should be. Gaming Beaver had some gameplay footage that showed the underwater camera, so you can in fact go into the deep water and like watch your dinosaur swim through it from below. So there's that. Best in Slot had a really nice shot of the terrain tools. He maxed out the all the sliders and then made this giant needle sharp spire in the middle of, I think this was one of the sandbox parks, showing that like you could really push this looks almost exactly like the high end like JW2 modded terrain tools, which just kind of take off all the training wheels and let you just go nuts. So very cool to see that you can essentially have full access to that by default in 3. There's no hand holding for like, oh, it's not realistic to have this giant needle like spire. They just let you do it, which is great. Very cool. One thing I noticed specifically in Frontier stream today was when they were putting in the paths, we had all these different kinds of paths now, right? And we have these settings for the paths. And one thing they called attention to was the size of the path. So the person who was building the park debated what width of path they wanted to put in. But we just have this simple, slider here that can switch off of large. Now, interestingly, this to me implies the removal of path size research and path capacity as a mechanic, which I think is good. Path capacity was annoying and lame and artificial. It would result in you having this nice compact park and then not having enough path capacity and needing just to put in like random loops of paths or extra paths to try to get that up. Very artificial, very gamey, probably one of my least favorite mechanics added for the management in 2. I really actually do hope this is gone. And I think this heavily implies that path capacity is out, which is fantastic. Great. Excellent. We also saw that the paths can automatically generate terrain ramps. So if you connect this lower part of the terrain to this upper part, then the terrain, generates the ramp for you to smooth that out so that those can connect. Great stuff. Just in general, seeing the terrain tools and the building tools in action looked really nice. The way the base textures would update depending on elevation and the steepness of like the terrain was fantastic. Like if you have a ground area that's grass and then you make a big hill, it'll automatically convert the grass to the rock. And then if you flatten off the top, it'll reconvert the rock on the top to grass where it's flat. So that seems like it seems so nice for making these more involved and detailed and elaborate environments without it taking forever, like it does in JWE2, with modded terrain tools and stuff. I'm continuously impressed by how good the terrain tools look. Um, they are 100% the thing I'm most excited about, and I think the biggest improvement in the game. Here's an example of how I was talking about those genetic traits modifying appeal. Specifically, we can see here the small appetite and quench traits on this Guanlong both provide a bonus 5% appeal. This makes these kind of secondary traits that we almost never use in GW2 a little bit better in 3. It also kind of propagates to making the animal breeding a little more involved because these traits can transfer. So potentially, there could be a situation where you breed an animal with one trait, you breed another animal with the other trait, and then you crossbreed the two to get both traits on the juvenile that maybe you wouldn't have had enough like modification points to get consistently in the first place. Um, and it means you can kind of filter and like optimize your breeding pathways through the controlled breeding to get the perfect next generation from like maximum appeal. Seems pretty cool. Another thing people brought up on Reddit that I think was interesting is we had the help box briefly pop up for the dinosaur encounter, the petting zoo. Now I didn't catch this in the stream, but looking at it on Reddit when somebody posted this, you can actually see a list of the available juveniles and adults that can be used with the encounter. Now this is almost certainly a filtered list, only including the animals that were in this build. There's some noticeable absence gaps in this roster. And it would be crazy if specifically only the animals that had already been revealed were the ones that could only interact with the dinosaur encounter. It just seems unlikely. Now, this is really the first confirmation we have that some of the adult species can actually interact with the dinosaur encounter. In all the gameplay footage and previews we've seen for this, I'm pretty sure it was always juveniles, and it is primarily juveniles, but it is not strictly just juveniles. So Dryosaurus can get in there, and then some other smaller animals, notably Notosaurus also makes it. Homalocephaly is a weird absence on here, but I believe it was not in this build. So that's kind of the evidence that even this tooltip is filtered for available species. Because yeah, it would seem a little weird if we didn't have Homalocephaly in the petting zoo. He seems like a good fella. A few notes on breeding and dimorphism. In EvoSquare's gameplay, you can actually see the nest empty, and then when the two animals breed and lay an egg, the egg does appear in the nest, a single egg, which then hatches into a single individual. So the eggs are apparently generated dynamically for the clutch size, and do visibly appear in the nest, which is a nice detail. I do like that. A lot of the gameplay footage we've seen of the nest, they've been covered in bushes and rocks, and so we don't get a chance to see the eggs or see if there even were eggs. So it's really nice that is there. In Frontier Stream, we see that the Gallimimus is a communal nester. It wants multiple nests together in a single breeding site within close proximity in order for it to feel comfortable to breed and lay eggs. I believe it was 3 nests in the gameplay footage. I quite like this. These kind of like little quirks, different behavioral things being applied to different species goes a long way towards making them feel more like animals. Hopefully, here's my hope. I hope that it's not just simply this is how ornithomimosaurs breed. They need 3 nests every time. I hope that they break this down and they add interesting little quirks to species specifically. Like if Gallimimus wants 3 nests to be in order to communally breed, then that's what it does. And then Struthiomimus maybe doesn't care about this, only wants 1 nest. That kind of thing. I would like it to not feel video gamey. I would like it to not feel like these animals belong to an RPG class and therefore they all function exactly the same. This was a big problem with like JWE1 especially, I felt, where like You know, you had you had like this very video gamey progression path as you went through the different species within category. You know, you'd start with your Ankylosaurus, right? And he was solitary, except his population capped out at 8. And then you'd go to the next animal, which was like Notosaurus, which was like 1 to 7. And then, you know, Polacanthus 1 to 6, and all the way up to Sauropelta, which was like 1 to 4 social. There was this very like video gamey, obvious like theming to numbers and progression. And it resulted in really the animals kind of all feeling the same within a category. The DLC did a lot better for this, and JWE2 does a lot better for this. And so hopefully they'll continue that trend by having the breeding requirements for each animal feel unique and at least fairly unique and distinctive to that animal, and not just a simple, you are an ornithomimosaur, so you want 3 nests close together. That's my point. Some other breeding and dimorphism things. We got visual confirmation, this was not obvious before, that the female Ceratosaurus model is actually different. The horn is actually very small and rounded off there on the nose. Adding this to the roster of animals that do not have a returning JW2 model technically. The Edmontosaurus and Chasmosaurus previously were revealed to have essentially what happens is the model from JW2 is modified to make the female and to make the male, rather than the model being the female or the male and then making a new model for the other one. Meaning that there's essentially no way to recreate the exact animal from JW2 in 3. And now the Ceratosaurus has been confirmed to be the same way. We also got our first look at the male Corythosaurus. Bigger head crest with a different pattern on it. I think it looks pretty good. I think I don't see people talk about this much, but you can see the male Corythosaurs in the herd in JP3. There's very clearly 2 different colorizations for the Corythosaur crests. There's like these muted orange ones and then these brighter red ones. This doesn't look exactly like that, like the coloring of the crest does, the patterning of the crest does in JP3, but it is kind of reminiscent because there is kind of a spoke thing going on with those crests a little bit. And I don't hate this aesthetically as like its own design. The spokes on the crest is pretty distinctive in game as like its own thing. So that looks pretty decent. We also get a good look at the Giganotosaurus dimorphism. Coming here from Gaming Beaver, you can see that the male Giga has this more extended spine on its back that is much more smooth. You know, in the film Giga, we have this very clear divot. All right, sorry about that. Yes, where did I leave off here? The spine is different. So the female is based on the Dominion design, where the spine kind of has this very distinctive downturn, very sharp, kind of triangular, whereas the male actually gives like more of a kind of an Acrocanthosaurus vibe of having this more gentle swoop. Like the spikes on the back are generally a little bit bigger, I would say, but I think it's much more, honestly, I think it's like way more visually appealing to have this like kind of nicer row of back spines here. I kind of like this. We also have, of course, the male Maiasaura, a much better look at that. Entirely different kind of, well, I mean, it's still like clearly a Maiasaura, right? But a pretty distinctly different head. The brow ridge has a little bit of a different look to it. This point on the back of the skull is a little bit more exaggerated. And especially noticeable is the much larger nose. I quite like this male Maiasaura. It's also got this like extra splash of color along the shoulder here that I think is good. I think this is a good animal. Already overly hated in 2, and I think it's getting a nice bump in JWE3. We have live birth for some, at least for the Megalodon, perhaps other lagoon animals. The mother Megalodon swims into the, let's adjust this slightly, since that alert there is on the side of the slide. Well, that's also just going to put everything on the other side off. Okay, well, you don't need to see the whole alert. It's fine. But yeah, you get a little alert that the live birth is happening. You zoom into the little lagoon hatchery, not the hatchery, but the lagoon nest, which is this like stand of kelp. The mother has swum into the kelp and now she swims out with her babies. That's essentially how the live birth works. Pretty bare bones, but you know it is present. Okay, why are you doing that now? Okay, well, in order for me to transition automatically between slides, apparently we have to have the slides all the way over to the side of the screen, so that's very cool. Male raptors have quills. This was pretty clear from the website, but there was some debate. Some people called it a rendering error or a visual glitch. No, every male raptor has quills, with the exception of the Lost World male. Um, that the Lost World male remains screen accurate in the sense that it does not have quills. So that's a good thing to see. I'm glad that I'm happy to see some embellishment added to the essentially the non-canon male version for the game, while keeping the film canon version consistent with the movies. I like that distinction. That's good. Um, some other customization things that are worth pointing out here. We get decoration blueprints that dynamically update to match the foliage of the current biome you're building in. So if you build a decoration that has some plants in one biome, you save that blueprint so that you can access it later in other parks. And then you access that blueprint in a new park. The foliage will update to the biome you're in. Now, I don't know. I didn't rewatch this. I'm trying to get this video done here, so I didn't go back through everything. I don't know if that's an option or if you have to update the biome. Like if I'm building a park in Hawaii and I want to have some cactus planters in my park, can I do that? I would hope so, but I don't know. I don't know if they would automatically update to like a palm tree or something, right? Hopefully not, but who knows? Um, Ian Malcolm Jr. on Reddit confirmed that you can customize the amphitheater. So this was kind of a complaint some people had in JWE2 with the amphitheater. We eventually got it as a placeable building on any map, but it never updated anything for it. So it always said Jurassic Park San Diego. And now you can actually customize that and change that. It makes a lot of sense. I would imagine, essentially, I would assume and imagine that every building in game has been essentially broken down into its component parts, so that you can customize it to your heart's delight. I would assume that that is why you can adjust like the sign here. But it, good to get some confirmation that at least you can do that. So there's that. We get the vehicle skins from JW2 returning. Ian Malcolm Jr. on Reddit again states that every vehicle skin from JWE2 is present in 3, including the JWE2 pre-order skins. So like the I forget exactly what they were. I think this is like the Lost World skin, which was the pre-order for 2, if I'm not mistaken. So that is returning in 3. So that's good. We had some skins from, or maybe a lot of skins from 1 for vehicles that didn't return in 2, so it's nice to see those. So yeah, those are kind of all the major news items I had in my notes from the weekend. Everything I kind of was able to find. I'm sure I've missed some things. Again, I'll reiterate, if you know anything interesting that seems to be new that I missed, please throw it in the comments. Maybe we'll cover it in a second video later, or just draw attention to it in some post or something. But we do have one final piece of news unrelated to the preview weekend, and that is coming from Hiplobinoxa on Reddit. Hiplobinoxa looked at the website in using some inspect tools and found that the JW3 website animals are listed by their in-game ID in the game code. The way this works is every animal in the game has a matching number, and when you look into like the game databases that actually control like the parameters of the animals, generally basically they refer to the animals by those ID numbers, right, in the actual code. And it turns out that the JWE3 website uses the exact same numbers for the animals on the website that they do in the database code in JWE2, right? So essentially, like Spinoceratops is 115 in the code, and on the website it's animal 115, even though there aren't 115 animals in JWE3. So every missing animal still has its number assigned to it. That number still exists in the database separately from the fact that the animal isn't in JWE3. And so what was seen here was that Protoceratops was animal number 124, and JWE2 ended at 122 with the park manager's collection animals. So, you know, it makes obvious sense that the numbering would just continue. JWE3 is built off JWE2's code, which is built off JWE1's code. So that, you know, there's a lot of legacy stuff in there that transfers over. And so, yeah, we see that Protoceratops falls at 124 and nothing is in the code at 123. 123 is a gap that corresponds to a new animal. Now, maybe like this, there's definitely the possibility that animal number 123 has been cut or held back for a DLC. There's a possibility that for whatever reason 123 was just never assigned to an animal. Like this is all possible. It's also perhaps possible that they use the in-game database codes for the first 122 animals just for consistency. They used it for the animals from JW3 that are in JW2 for consistency with the JW2 databases and code, and then they added the new animals that weren't in 2, just chucked them in at the end sequentially, and those numbers have nothing to do with their placements in the game databases and code for JW3. A lot of stuff we don't know here, but this is really like the first like real evidence that we have that actually does point towards there being at least one more new species yet to be revealed. And in particular, Best in Slot in one of his videos made a little veiled comment that while he was talking to somebody hinted towards there being a new species yet to be revealed for JWE3 and that they were really excited about it. And then subsequently, after that, Best in Slot went back and deleted that comment. I'm assuming he cut it out of the video. I didn't like rewatch it, but I saw people on Reddit talking about this, which probably points towards Frontier saying, hey, don't do that. Or Best in Slot himself got cold feet about making that comment and preemptively deleted it so that he wouldn't offend Frontier. But I have no such qualms because I don't get invitations to Frontier's things. So I will talk about any and every leak or possible leak. Specifically, if we want to look at the oops, hold on. The slides are being weird again. Why does it? Oh, because this is the last slide and I can't scroll down any further. Yes, of course. Hold on. Let me fix this. Specifically, if you want to see the numbering, it is slowly being positioned on the screen. Boom. There we go. So let's slide this over one more time. Okay. So we have the secret species pack positions when they were added in JWE2, 115 through 118. I guess the numbers for the hybrids from 1 were reused, or maybe the numbers in 2 didn't actually carry over from 1. I actually never thought about that until this moment. But anyway, the important thing is that the numbers from 2 do carry over to 3. So we have the 4 slots for the secret species pack, which are all, of course, in JWE3, and the numbers match. And then we have 2 animals in JWE3 confirmed so far that were from the park manager pack, Megalodon and Thanatos Dracon, which show up as numbers 120 and 121, respectively. And then 119 and 122 correspond to Stegosaurus and Microceratus. And then we have 123, which is this gap, which is an unknown animal. And then Proto, Patago, Loki, Sidiko, and Guanlong show up in that specific order. So it's notable that, like, 124 or whatever is not the first animal we had revealed for a new species. I mean, it kind of is. Protoceratops kind of is. But, like, Guanlong is 128, right? Patago Titan is shown before Loki Ceratops, but Loki Ceratops is revealed before Patago Titan. So this isn't just simply like the reveal order, right? So there's decent reason to suspect that Animal 123 does exist and will be shown. And I assume this to be a carnivore. This roster is very herbivore heavy, which I don't hate, but just from like a marketing standpoint, it would be crazy to me if they didn't have a new carnivore at release. And so I would put the money down on 123 being a carnivore, probably a medium or a large carnivore, something flashy. So yeah. So one more animal probably coming. I think there's still a possibility of maybe there being 2 new species in the wings, but I think one is essentially guaranteed. I think it's essentially guaranteed just from a marketing standpoint. You want to reveal something closer to release to get like that last burst of hype, and I think this helps support that notion pretty well. Okay, well with that dryer buzzer, let's end this news video here, and yeah, we'll be back with more news on Tuesday when the next wave of species reveals happens. Maybe mysterious animal number 123 will be revealed on Tuesday. I think that's too soon. If there's only one animal left revealed, I really do expect it to be like the last thing we see kind of before launch, more or less. But then again, we're getting close to having the full roster known, and I don't know. I think we've only really got about 2 weeks worth of reveals at the rate they're putting stuff on the website. So maybe we see it in 2 weeks. Who knows? Who knows what the future holds?